Public Affairs very much thanks Residco, our sole corporate underwriter, for helping to make the production of this show possible.
But I've heard over the years people would say, the Illinois Constitution guarantees every student in Illinois the right to a quality education. Do you think they're right?
I think not only the Constitution, but it should be the lifeblood of everybody here in this state, the lifeblood of every person running and who occupies offices here in the state.
Straight, what would you do to give all of the 2 million students in kindergarten through grade 12 school choice? Give us the basics in a minute of that school choice program.
Well, it's not really a minute in terms of what can be done, but the parents should be able to have school choice and go to schools of what they want, better schools.
Categories where if they took their money, say we expect some efficiency and competition, so they don't take all 32,000, they take 80%, say 26. Say we give them 26,000 to go to where? To go to what would the options be?
It could be a charter school, it could be a private school, whole variety. Yeah, and homeschooling too. Facts that indicate even after election day, people went to some of the places and said, you didn't vote, you didn't send in your mail-in ballot, you still have time. Whether those are true or not true, but I've heard them in different parts of both the county and of the state of Illinois.
Right. And so the point is, people say, well, Bob, you can't prove this. You haven't proved it. Well, I think what would your response be to that question?
Well,
if they said, don't worry about it, Bob, this is manufactured, we hope the Supreme Court doesn't decide the way you say, because we don't have a problem with fraud, and you haven't shown. What's your response?
Well, first of all, I think under the election code portion of the Attorney General's law, he has the right to initiate criminal prosecution with respect to violations of the election code. And that's especially after some of the state's attorneys won't initiate prosecutions. Well, I think it's time for investigations on what needs to be done. I've seen it, I've heard it throughout many of the elections that I've been involved in. And I think it's time that we need to have voter integrity.
You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name, and politics is our game. You have never heard, I can say this with assurance, anybody running for Attorney General who is on point as Bob Fioretti was in part one of our show. Try to be fair. And Kwame Roll, you come on. We'll give you the same chance. And if you do something like that and you're on point, whether I agree or disagree with you, we'll love it. And then we'll come back and have both of you on. So this is a challenge, Kwame Roll. Come and meet and speak with and debate. Who? Bob Fioretti, your opponent. It's coming up in the Supreme Court. It had its genesis here in Illinois. It's a Mississippi case now. That's, I'm predicting, will be decided in what? The Supreme Court, they'll release their opinion within a week.
And it should be done shortly, and maybe by the time this show is being broadcast.
I think the case name is Watson v. RNC. You're the lawyer. You're the professor at the law school. You know everything civil and criminal procedure. You know about election integrity. What's the issue that the court is facing?
Well, it's sort of simple. And should ballots be counted after midnight on the daily election? Pure and simple, and that's how we go.
And should they be counted? What does the law say now in Illinois?
Law in Illinois gives 14 days after the election day.
14 days after election for what?
For mail-in ballots or ballots to arrive.
Before we get to counting, we have to decide what ballots do they count. And right now, if it shows up 14 days later, so they have to wait 14 days. 14 days after, has to be postmarked by the election.
Right, it's a change.
And then
yes.
14 days after they receive it, they can count it. It
right.
counts.
Absolutely.
But this case that's being decided by the court is being argued by the plaintiffs who brought it that they shouldn't have 14 days because this baby, the U.S. Constitution, says what? The election day, right?
Right.
They should basically,
And we're in
the Constitution, they should have until the election.
yeah, but we are in a 40-day election voting cycle.
Well, that's another
So,
problem. That's not up to the
That's a
court to
huge
decide.
problem. That adds to this whole problem.
Right, but for now, we can get to, we don't have enough time to hit, you're talking about early voting. This would cut off the tail 14 days after. You'd like to cut off, it sounds like, the 40 days before early voting and get away from an election season and have an election day. But that's
Right.
for our third show. We only got two.
All right,
Okay,
you got
that's
it.
number two. So let's focus on this issue that we're talking about. What is the Supreme Court going to decide? Forget how, we'll get to how they decide, but what's the issue?
Whether or not to count the ballot after the election day,
Okay,
pure and simple.
and what do you think they'll decide?
I think they're going to go, and listening to most of the argument, I think they're going to say at midnight that night, that's it, that's the end. Any ballots received later will not be counted.
Right, and if we look at our neighbors here, in the state of Illinois, how are they dealing with this problem now? Because Illinois, as you've said, allows up to 14 days after the election day for the ballot to arrive and be counted, right?
Right.
But what do they do in Wisconsin? When
Well, we've got all of our surrounding neighbors, all 6 of them, stop at election day.
So
Wisconsin,
Kentucky,
Michigan, Indiana, Kentucky, Missouri, and Iowa all say election day, that's it.
So even before we get to the rest of the states around the country, among so-called, we think, similar Midwestern values, Illinois is the outlier,
Right?
with an emphasis on the word liar.
Mm-hmm.
Are we respecting the Constitution, Bob?
I would say no.
You think the U.S. Supreme Court majority will say, no, we're not respecting it, and they're gonna hold state of Illinois and any other state, hold their feet to the line and say, toe that line.
I absolutely do. And look at the mess that happened in California on the voting for the LA mayor and for governor. I don't know if they're still counting, but they kept going day after day after day.
Keep finding
So,
ballots
all the time.
We don't know if fraud has been shown, but we think what we do know, if we're thoughtful, if you give 14 days of opportunity to find ballots and commit some fraud, that's worse for the people of the state than if you don't allow any days for that opportunity. Am I right?
That's correct. I've heard a lot of different stories, and I'm not saying they're stories, but facts that indicate even after election day, people went to some of the places and said, you didn't vote, you didn't send in your mail-in ballot, you still have time. Whether those are true or not true, but I've heard them in different parts of both the county and of the state of Illinois.
Right. And so the point is, people say, well, Bob, you can't prove this. You haven't proved it. Well, I think what would your response be to that question?
Well,
if they said, don't worry about it, Bob, this is manufactured, we hope the Supreme Court doesn't decide the way you say, because we don't have a problem with fraud and you haven't shown. What's your response?
well, first of all, I think under the election code portion of the Attorney General's law, he has the right to initiate criminal prosecution with respect to violations of the election code. And that's especially after some of the state's attorneys won't initiate prosecutions. Well, I think it's time for investigations on what needs to be done. I've seen it, I've heard it throughout many of the elections that I've been involved in. And I think it's time that we need to have voter integrity. People have to go to the polls to know that their vote counts. If somebody is even if one person is not supposed to vote or not allowed to vote or goes up and down and they vote and or double vote, well, that dilutes those that believe in the system, and we must restore voter integrity to our system. And I plan on doing that as your Attorney General.
And people should know fraud is concealed or else people wouldn't be getting away with it. You can discover it, you can prosecute it, but if you haven't discovered it, if you haven't prosecuted successfully, doesn't mean it didn't happen. It just means fraud by definition is something people try and often succeed at concealing. So I don't know if they can expect to see some fraud, they can expect to see some proof, but maybe the people, when they came up with the Constitution, they were thinking of an election day because there's less fraud before and there's less fraud after. If you can watch, like I did, many others a long time ago, we were essentially poll watchers from both parties. Make sure you only had to be at one place and one time where the voting was. Now you got to somehow watch for fraud 40 days before, 14 days. A lot more opportunity, right?
That is correct.
Okay.
So
another issue that may come up, on election integrity is when you have an absentee ballot, who gets to submit that absentee ballot? Is it the voter, as some states require, or the household or the family to actually bring that ballot to the polling place or mail it in or submit it? Who gets to submit it? In Illinois, anybody that the voter authorizes.
that's why I'm shaking my head. And
So we are the most permissive state again relative to our 6 neighbors.
right, absolutely.
We're the outlier again.
Most of the surrounding states only require a family member. There may be a little.
Not only, but they require a family member, which is way more limiting than Illinois says.
Than anybody.
Any drunk, anybody you can find on the street, that becomes a legal vote harvesting. They
Right.
harvest all the votes and they bring them in, and who's to know who actually even filled out that ballot?
Correct.
They say there's a signature, and then can we check the signature? Let's make it simple and restrict who actually can carry that vote, that ballot, to the polling place.
That is correct. Yep. And again, you don't know what happens, how they got the vote, how they did it. Family members you can trust, and they're limited and few between, and they bring the right kind, and it eliminates primarily the fraud that we see, and so that's what we need, because family members, neighbors are more strict than just anybody gathering it.
So we have a new concept here today in our last show of how we define what Kwame Raoul should have been doing for the last 8 years and what Bob Fioretti, well, I'm being fair and balanced because Bob Fioretti says what Kwame should have been doing, and it's not what Bob Fioretti promises to do if he's elected. Whether we're talking about election integrity, whether we were talking about street crime, and illegal immigration. And now we come to the fourth of our 4 topics in these 2 shows, which are the schools. People are saying, hey, Jeff, are you crazy? What does the Illinois Attorney General have to do with whether schools are performing? And if he's decided they're not, what can he do about it? What are the answers to those questions?
Well, first of all, we all understand how bad Illinois students can or are unfortunately performing at graduation rates.
The graduation rates are fine.
At the graduation rates.
Yeah, what does it mean to graduate 85% of the kids or 90%? What's the next question you ask?
And then what is their proficiency rate in reading, writing, math?
What are those proficiency rates? In Chicago, in Decatur, around the state, in Rockford? What are those? Do we have some data on Chicago and some other cities?
We have plenty of data on them, on all those, and it's unfortunately it varies by neighborhood, but black students have a very lesser number, so do Hispanics, and so do whites. We need to have, how are we preparing our students for the future? I first ran for alderman because I lived a half a block away from Whitney Young on one side and looked down the other, and I could see Crane High School, one of the most underserved, and I knew the kids weren't having the ability in terms of reading and writing and math. And I said we have to do something.
Where are those schools? Where are they? What city?
Right here in Chicago. on the west
How
side.
long ago was that?
When I first ran, it was '07.
Oh, seven. So we're talking 20 years ago.
And things haven't improved that much in
20 years, these public schools have had the opportunity to improve. Would you say not much?
yes, not much at all. And
Wire Points has looked at this. That means Ted Dabrowski, people know him. He ran in the Republican primary for governor. His able assistant, John Klinger, basically, and Mark Lennon. They've churned out enormous material. They're still churning it out. Not Ted's no longer president of Wire Points because he gave that up to be a candidate for governor,
correct.
but still churning out some of that data. And what they tell us is CPS, for instance, graduate students, but without the skills that you referred to they need. As we used to say, the 3 R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic. Not quite R's, with a joke.
Right.
But certainly on the reading and math side, and I think the same with writing. Reading in like 2023, the Illinois State Board of Education report card says blacks had graduated 79% in Chicago at CPS, but only 11% could read at grade level. And 8% did math proficiently. And for Hispanics, the two major minorities at CPS that make up about 85% of the students, 84% of Hispanics graduate, 18%, a little better, still not good, read at grade level, and 15% do math. We don't know about writing, it's even more of a challenge. But the thing is, those numbers, and Wire Points has studied this around the state, whether it's Rockford, whether it's Decatur, whether it's Quincy, whether it's black students or white students or Hispanic students, these numbers are not good. And around the state, Wire Points says about 40% around the state on average read at grade level and 60% don't. So you represent the people. Can you do anything, bro?
The Attorney General has a right to review many of the contracts and who's receiving taxpayer money. And the answer is yes, then. And we have to look at what needs to be done. Look, as I said last week in the show, that I'm going to represent the parents, not the unions who teach our students. And we need to make sure, which are the kids, yes. And make
the
sure.
neighbors, because they live in these neighborhoods and their assets decline in value. And so that we would hope they'd want the teaching to be good and the learning to be good, just out of the goodness of their heart. But if that's not enough, maybe they want the value of their house to be higher, so they want kids to be going to schools or have a choice to go to schools using these taxpayer funds, and they would perform.
Well, not only that,
Anything you
but
would disagree with that?
nope. But you see, that's where the ability to have school of choice comes in, and allows the parents to make those choices. Homeschooling is becoming more and more popular throughout the state of Illinois. We have rigid requirements for those that have undertaken the homeschool aspects, and those parents really should be saluted for the work they do and how they do it.
Well, what does it mean to have choice? Because you know what it means, I know, but there are people out there haven't really heard. They think the way it is the way it has to be. If they live in a certain zip code, there's a monopoly. Basically, it's a public school, and they can afford to go there. Yes, they could go to a private school, but that's going to cost a lot of money because CPS now spends $32,000 per kid per year in 2026.
And
$10 million budget.
we keep losing more,
16,000 students do the math.
but we keep losing more and more students, and the number keeps going up and up, and they don't end up having any difference in terms of their proficiency. And that becomes the problem.
State cost, the average around the state, lower, but still significant. I think it's something like 24,000 per kid per year. So Bob, if you're Attorney General, I hear that there's a thing, I haven't read it lately, the Illinois Constitution, but I've heard over the years people would say, the Illinois Constitution guarantees every student in Illinois the right to a quality education. Do you think they're right?
I think not only the Constitution, but it should be the lifeblood of everybody here in this state, the lifeblood of every person running and who occupies offices here in the state.
What would you do to give all all of the 2 million students in kindergarten through grade 12 school choice. Give us the basics in a minute of that school choice program.
Well, it's not really a minute in terms of what can be done, but the parents should be able to have school choice and go to schools of what they want, better schools.
Categories where if they took their money, say we expect some efficiency and competition, so they don't take all 32,000, they take 80%, say 26. Say we give them 26,000 to go to where? To go to what would the options be?
It could be a charter school, it could be a private school, whole variety. Yeah, and homeschooling too. So
and that's competition.
Yeah,
and in fact, under a federal program now, every governor can opt in to school choice at no extra cost to the state.
Right.
And Governor Pritzker's had that chance. He says he hasn't decided yet. Mm-hmm. What would you advise him?
Well, I think he ought to take a look at in the mirror, see where he's sending his kids, and say the same type of schools that they all have should be available for every individual student in the state of Illinois. And the same with those. Let's not forget, we have the head of the union sends one of her kids to a private Catholic school.
Stacey Davis.
Yeah. So
she says they're racist, but she's not. She's black, and she's sending her kid to not to the voucher. She's paying for it for her own whatever it is, $500K a year she gets from being president of 2 unions. I'm just guessing. Maybe it's
and a foundation and a few other things.
She can afford that, and she says, "Let them." Oh, okay, they can't eat bread. Let them eat cake, or something like that.
Right.
Okay. Folks, I hope you like the show. I hope you like part 1, part 2. If you missed any of it, you can always find it on youtube.com/publicaffairs.tv. If you're there and you liked it, let us know. Give us your comments. And come back, come back next week and every week to Public Affairs TV, because we hope you'll be seeing the current incumbent AG, Kwame Raoul, at some point debating the Republican candidate, Kwame's a Democrat, debating the Republican candidate, Bob Fioretti, Republican candidate for Attorney General. Thanks so much, Bob.
Thank you. Definitely.
4 months. Don't be a stranger around here. Same with Kwame.
You got it.